The Philadelphia 76ers season is over and they are ready to get weird. And the reason that I say that, the reason I say they have all this flexibility is because they have been aiming for this since basically the moment that James Harden requested a trade. One of the main reasons that they didn't want to bring back James Harden and maybe kind of, upset him a little bit by not giving him a big contract offer is because they wanted their salary cap table to look like this. Everybody on the roster other than Joel Embiid and Paul Reed, who they could buy out his non-guaranteed contract, is potentially a free agent. Now, Tyrese Maxey is going to get a max. See what I did there? That was actually on purpose. It's in my notes. Tyrese Maxey is going to get a max. They basically just held off on the extension because they wanted to maintain the flexibility, but he's going to get a rookie max contract extension, which I think is worth like 25% of the salary cap. When you add that to the Embiid number, they're going to be looking at between $45 to $50 million in salary cap space, depending on exactly where all the numbers fall. It's kind of funny that a number that massive, we don't actually even know exactly where the number is going to be. If you or I had $45 to $50 million, you better believe we know exactly what the number would be. But for Philadelphia this offseason, that is the number. Now, to be clear, they have to get rid of everybody else to get to that number. The way the free agency works in the NBA is you can't just sign guys under the salary cap and then re-sign your own players. If you want to re-sign Tobias Harris, I know Sixers fans don't, but if for whatever reason the Sixers are like, you know what, Tobias Harris has been giving us some good contributions. If they wanted to, they have to keep his cap hold on the roster. As soon as they get rid of his cap hold, that means they cannot re-sign him by going over the salary cap. They lose his bird rights. Technical salary cap free agency stuff. Essentially, I expect every single player that does not have a contract for next season, that is not named Tyrese Maxey, to not be on the Sixers next season and or get signed as a minimum or a mid-level exception player after they sign some of the bigger fish in free agency. And you might be thinking, who are some of these bigger fish in free agency? Well, unfortunately, not a fantastic class. The two at the top for Philadelphia that are like semi, maybe, sorta, maybe realistic are LeBron and Paul George. That's the pipe dream scenario for the 76ers this offseason. If they could pick a group of two players to pick from and potentially add to their roster in the offseason to use all the salary cap space for LeBron and Paul George, those are the two guys at the top of the list. Now, the LeBron thing, you never really know. He certainly could leave LA. Obviously, the whole Bronny thing is up in the air, but he has to be mentioned here. I mean, there are some rumors about the fact that he could maybe go to Philadelphia. It's been a possible free agency destination for him in the past. And even at, obviously, his I was going to say his old age, but that sounds so mean. His advanced age, even at this advanced point in his career, that sounds professional. Nice. Even at this advanced point in LeBron's career, him alongside Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, that's a really, really good team. You use the rest of the cap space and oh my gosh. What a pro wants, what a pro needs. And mid-level exception stuff, you use that to add other pieces on the roster, and those are your core three guys. Really interesting, right? I think more hopefully, more optimistically, they would hope to actually add someone like Paul George, who fits a little bit better in the, like, I'm going to be a, like, more so complementary star alongside Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid than LeBron. And even though obviously Paul George has his own injury issues, he's like 5 full years younger than LeBron is. So just a better overall asset for Philadelphia to have on a roster. If there is a number one, please, I want this to happen off season for the Sixers and their fans. It is probably they sign Paul George on a massive contract in free agency, take him away for the Clippers, and that's their big three going into next season. However, if we really want to go into percentages here, I'm putting that at like a 5 to 10% chance on either LeBron or Paul George. I mean, that to me yes, it would be exciting and interesting, but both those guys still kind of feel like they would be staying in LA. That's just me. Which means you need to start going down the next tier in free agency. And unfortunately for Philadelphia, there's a pretty big gap between tier 1 and tier 2. We're looking at like DeMar DeRozan, Klay Thompson. That's the tier. That's everybody in the next tier. Like, assuming that, Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, these guys are staying, which I think they are. You could go out and get James Harden. You think he'd be down? Could you imagine? I think Daryl Morey's the one GM in the entire league. I could actually see him like calling James Harden and be like, hey, what if we give you a max contract now? Then after that tier, this is what we're looking at right now for Philadelphia. If you're not getting DeMar, if you're not getting Klay, if you're not getting LeBron, if you're not getting Paul George, if you're not getting James Harden, these are the free agency options. Emmanuel Quickley, D'Angelo Russell, Malik Monk. No disrespect to Malik Monk. I like Malik Monk. Bruce Brown. Maybe if the Pacers decline the team option, I don't think if the Raptors decline the team option, which I don't think they will, but maybe. That's where we're at. Those are the free agency options. So even as cool as it is to be like, hey, look at all this salary cap space we have. We could get Paul George in 2 months. That sounds really cool. You also could pay Malik Monk and Bruce Brown like $50 million a year combined. Like, that's a realistic outcome as well. I think the Klay thing is pretty interesting for them, because even as much as I want him to go somewhere like Orlando, if he does end up leaving Golden State, to provide, kind of that championship culture to a younger team and spacing certainly to that young Magic team, I think more realistically, he would still be looking to, go and try and win some more titles, and Philadelphia represents a better opportunity to do that than a place like Orlando. I think Klay, if I had to pick one of the most, like, I don't even know if likely is the right word, because there's so many potential options in free agency. The most likely outcome I do feel like is probably something in that, like, Klay, maybe not DeMar DeRozan, because he doesn't really fit the Morey profile. Something like that, though. And I do think some people are going to argue for the concept of, like, well, why don't you just spend the money on Malik Monk, Bruce Brown? Like, why not spend the $50 million on, like, 3 guys or 4 guys rather than go out and chase stars? I mean, Embiid's one of the best players in the league. Maxey's one of the best backcourt players either in the East or in the league itself. Like, why do you need to add another star? Why do you need to add a Paul George? If it becomes an option where you can just go and get, 3 high caliber role player guys, why don't you just do that? I mean, yes, that certainly is an option, but that doesn't really differentiate you very much from this year's Sixers team. Now, to be fair, this year's Sixers team was actually pretty good. It was just the fact that Embiid wasn't healthy. I mean, Embiid, Maxey, and a whole bunch of other guys that can shoot and guard a little bit is a really, really good team. I mean, it's not on the level of something like the Celtics, but arguably nobody is on the level of what the Celtics have. And if you're Philadelphia, all you can do is use the salary cap space and try and continue to add pieces, keep Embiid happy, and make sure that he doesn't go anywhere else. Like, that's all you can do. And unfortunately for Philadelphia, in terms of flexibility, the ability to add talent, the salary cap space is really the only way they have to do that. They owe a ton of future picks to a variety of different teams. Like, draft pick trades are not really in the cards for them. And so even though, maybe they go out and get someone like Donovan Mitchell, theoretically, they can't actually, unless they want to trade away Tyrese Maxey, which doesn't really make any sense. Which brings me to the pessimistic part of the video, okay? Regardless of what Philadelphia does in the offseason, assuming that it doesn't include LeBron or Paul George or something like that, even if they end up getting, Klay Thompson and Malik Monk or something, even in that scenario, I'm concerned about the future of the Philadelphia 76ers, because whenever, big guys like Joel Embiid, whenever they fall off, whenever they go from, like, I'm averaging 31 a game to, I'm averaging 20 a game and 11 boards. Like, whenever they go from those 2 spots, it happens really quickly. And obviously Embiid, when he was healthy this season, golly, we're going to say that a lot. Whenever he was healthy this season, was fantastic. Arguably the best player in the league. If he had played 70 games, probably would have won the MVP at the pace that he was on. But especially when you're a big guy, you're dealing with lower body leg injuries, when you're dealing with that kind of stuff every single year, and when you are, as Embiid is, constantly playing through those things, it starts to take its toll. Embiid's a big guy. He's getting older. I would not be surprised if within the next 2 years, Joel Embiid is no longer an MVP caliber player. And when that happens, whatever roster you try and put around him and Tyrese Maxey is no longer viable as a championship contender unless you have LeBron, Paul George, one of these other guys. And if they don't get one of those guys this offseason, the entirety of what they have, what they build, what they try and add this offseason in free agency depends upon Joel Embiid's health. Now, that's kind of always the case, but that's that timer, whatever point we get to Joel Embiid not being an MVP caliber player anymore, we get closer and closer to that timer hitting 0 all the time. I mean, obviously, I hope Embiid is awesome for the next 10 years. I'm not rooting against the guy. I'm just thinking realistically about how the Sixers can continue to add to the roster. And I think that's one of the reasons why they are so aggressive in trying to add a star, because they know that at some point they're going to need someone to pick up the slack. And as awesome as Tyrese Maxey is, that's a lot of slack to pick up if Joel Embiid goes from like MVP caliber guy to like really, really good all-star, borderline all-NBA caliber player. And so I say all that to say, Philadelphia is in a weird spot. They're going to have an opportunity to improve, certainly much more of an opportunity to improve than a lot of the other teams in the conference, which is really good for them. But in terms of this particular offseason, it feels just absolutely gigantic for the future of the Sixers, because if they're going to win a title, if they're really going to make a push at this thing, it's probably going to be in the next 24 months. Like, it's probably going to be in the next 2 years, because at some point things are going to fall apart for them. And I think they're aware of that. Obviously, the other concern is that Embiid could potentially want to leave if things don't go well. I think we've kind of pushed that stuff away for now, but that's the main concern, 100%.